Admiral Vorthok stood before the massive holographic display in the command center of his flagship. The blue and green planet rotated slowly in the projection, its single moon casting shadows across continents. His 6 eyes studied the data streams. Flowing beside the image, "Report," he commanded, his voice echoing through the bridge. Commander Nexus approached with a data tablet clutched in her clawed hands. She had served under Vorthok for 20 years and had witnessed the conquest of dozens of worlds. This assignment seemed routine compared to their previous campaigns. The third planet from this system's star shows clear signs of civilization. Admiral Shi began, her tone professional, but slightly bored. Our deep space probes have collected extensive data over the past 6 months. Vorthok's mandibles clicked. Together, a sound that indicated his attention. Continue. The planet is divided into approximately 200 separate political entities. They call themselves nations, but they lack any form of unified government or military command structure. Most concerning for any potential resistance, they actively engage in warfare against each other using primitive chemical explosives and projectile weapons. The Admiral's forearms crossed over his chest as he processed this information. In his experience, divided worlds were the easiest to conquer. Species that fought among themselves rarely united against external threats until it was far too late. "What about their technology level?" he asked. "Primitive by our standards, sir. They've achieved basic spaceflight using chemical propulsion. But their fastest vessels would take them centuries to reach even their nearest neighboring star. No energy weapons, no defensive shields, no faster-than-light communication or travel capabilities." Vorthok walked closer to the hologram, studying the planet's surface. City lights dotted the night side, indicating a reasonably developed civilization, but nothing that suggested advanced military capabilities. Population: approximately 8 billion individuals. They appear to be a single species with minor physical variations. Intelligence suggests they are carbon-based, similar to the Kepler worlds we integrated last cycle.
On the distant planet.
They were discussing. Dr. Hyun-Woo Kim pushed his glasses up his nose and squinted at the computer screen in his Seoul laboratory. The numbers dancing across the monitor made no sense according to everything he knew about natural electromagnetic phenomena. For 3 weeks, deep space monitoring stations around the world had been detecting strange signals. The patterns were too regular to be natural, too structured to be random cosmic noise. Kim had been working 18-hour days trying to decode what the signals might mean. The laboratory door burst open suddenly. Dr. Minji Park rushed in, her usually neat hair disheveled and her lab coat wrinkled. She carried a tablet and wore an expression that mixed excitement with terror. "Hyun-Woo, you need to see this immediately," she said, breathless from running through the corridors. "I've been analyzing the signal patterns with the team in building. See?" She connected her tablet to the main display system, and the screen filled with waveforms and frequency analyses. Kim recognized some of the data as similar to what he had been studying, but Park's analysis was more detailed. "These signals aren't random," she continued, pointing to specific patterns on the screen. "Look at these repetitions. Look at this mathematical progression. This is artificial. This is communication." Kim felt his stomach drop. Communication from where? That's what terrifies me. The signals are coming from outside our solar system, but they're getting stronger. Much stronger. Whatever is sending them is getting closer to Earth. Similar conversations were taking place in research facilities around the world. In Houston, Commander Jae-Soon Lee sat in a secure conference room at NASA reviewing classified data that had been shared with only the highest levels of government officials. The electromagnetic signatures matched what Korean and Russian scientists had detected, but American satellite systems had captured additional information. The source is definitely approaching our solar system, Lee explained to the assembled officials. Based on the rate of signal strengthening, whatever is out there should reach Earth within days, not weeks. In Moscow, Dr. So-Young Choi worked frantically to coordinate with international colleagues. The Russian space program had the most powerful deep space monitoring equipment on Earth, and their data painted an increasingly alarming picture. The signals were not just getting stronger, they were becoming more complex. Multiple sources were transmitting, suggesting not a single vessel, but an entire fleet of unknown craft approaching Earth. Back aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Vorthok made his decision with the casual confidence of someone who had conquered 47 worlds. "Deploy Battle Group 7, he ordered. 1 dreadnought, 3 heavy cruisers, and standard support vessels. Commander Nexus, you will oversee the operation." Nexus nodded. "Standard integration protocol, Admiral?" "Of course." "Orbital demonstration. Of force, broadcast surrender demands. Allow 72 hours for compliance. If they resist, implement pacification procedures and begin processing survivors for labor classification." The Admiral turned away from the hologram, already thinking about the next system on their expansion list. Earth was just another primitive world to be added to the Empire's vast collection of conquered civilizations. Sir Nexus called out, "Should we prepare for extended operations? Some species require additional persuasion." Vorthek's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "Commander, look at that data again. They fight each other with chemical explosives. They cannot even unite their own planet. This will be our easiest conquest this cycle." The Zephyrian fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly as Admiral Vorthok had planned. 12 massive warships appeared in Earth's orbit simultaneously, their dark holes blocking sunlight from major cities below. The dreadnought positioned itself over New York, while the cruisers took positions above London, Tokyo, and Moscow. Vorthok stood on his bridge, watching the planet's surface through the observation windows. It performed this same demonstration 47 times before, and the results were always predictable. First came the panic, as primitive detection systems registered the fleet's arrival, then desperate attempts at communication. Finally, within hours, the surrender transmissions would begin. "Admiral, we're detecting increased electromagnetic activity across the planet," Commander Nexus reported. "Their communication networks are extremely active." "Excellent," Vorthok replied. "Fear spreads quickly among primitive species. Prepare the surrender demand for broadcast." But something was different this time. Instead of chaotic panic transmissions, the communication patterns showed coordination. Military frequencies around the globe were synchronizing rather than fragmenting. In New York, Secretary General Dong Hyen Park stood before an emergency assembly of the United Nations. Representatives from every nation sat in the same room, many of whom had been enemies just hours before. The alien ships casting shadows over their cities had accomplished what decades of diplomacy could not. "The time for our old conflicts has ended," Park announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the assembly hall. "These beings have come to our world uninvited. They threaten not just one nation, but all of humanity. We must respond as one people, not as divided countries." The response was immediate and unanimous. Ancient rivals shook hands. Military commanders who had spent careers preparing to fight each other began sharing intelligence and resources. Captain Jaemin Song received the call at Osan Air, base in South Korea. He had been scrambling his fighter squadron when the International Moon coordination order came through. Within minutes, he found himself on a secure video conference with pilots from China, Japan, Russia, and the United States. "This is unprecedented," admitted Colonel Williams from the U.S. Air Force.
But we're all
Flying the same mission now. The aliens began their broadcast exactly 72 hours after arrival. The message appeared on every television screen, radio frequency, and internet connections simultaneously. A mechanical voice spoke in perfect versions of Earth's major languages. "Inhabitants of the third planet, you are now subjects of the Zephyrian Empire. Cease all resistance activities. Prepare for integration processing. You have 72 hours to comply." The response came not from individual governments, but from humanity itself. Every major leader stood together as Secretary General Park delivered a single word that would change galactic history. "No." Commander Nexus studied the tactical reports with growing confusion. "Admiral, their response patterns don't match any previous conquest. Usually some factions attempt to surrender, while others resist. This species is showing complete unity." Admiral Vorthok dismissed her concerns. "Unity born of fear. Once we demonstrate our capabilities, they will surrender like all the others." The first Zephyrian assault shuttles landed in major population centers, expecting to face scattered, poorly coordinated resistance. Instead, they encountered something unprecedented. Dr. Hyen-Woo Kim had spent the 3-day ultimatum period working with scientists from every major nation, sharing data about the alien electromagnetic signatures and analyzing debris from the first skirmishes. Their energy weapons operate on predictable frequencies, he explained to Dr. Minji Park and their international colleagues via secure video link. We can build interference devices using modified radar equipment. The information spread instantly across the globe. Within hours, improvised countermeasures were being deployed in every major city. Lieutenant Juwon Park crouched behind the rubble of what had been Seoul's City Hall. His unit consisted of soldiers from 7 different countries, men and women, who had been enemies weeks ago but now fought side by side. The alien patrol approached their position with confidence, their energy weapons scanning for targets. Remember, Park whispered into his radio, they expect us to run or surrender. We do neither. The ambush was perfect. Electromagnetic pulse. Devices disrupted the aliens' weapons just long enough for human soldiers to close the distance. Hand-to-hand combat was something the Zephyrians had never encountered. Their previous conquests had either surrendered or fought from a distance. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Civilians who had never held weapons learned to fight alongside professional soldiers. Entire neighborhoods became fortified positions. Schools and hospitals transformed into command centers and weapon manufacturing facilities. The Zephyrian 3-day operation stretched into its first week, then its second. Commander Nexus filed increasingly disturbing reports. Admiral, their resistance is unlike anything in our military database.
Ow.
They're not fighting for territory or resources. They're not trying to preserve their governments or social structures. They seem to be fighting for the abstract concept of remaining unconquered. Impossible, Vorthok replied. All species fight for survival or resources. Sir, I've analyzed their communication intercepts. They use phrases like freedom and independence more than tactical terms. They appear to prefer death to surrender, which makes no evolutionary sense. By the end of the first month, what should have been a routine planetary integration had become the bloodiest campaign in Zephyrian military history. The humans fought with a determination that bordered on madness, using tactics that seemed designed to inflict maximum psychological damage on their conquerors. Captain Song's fighter squadron had learned to use the aliens' own technology against them, salvaging equipment from downed craft and incorporating it into human weapons systems. The 3-day conquest had become something entirely different. And Admiral Vorthok was beginning to understand that he had underestimated more than just Earth's military capabilities. 8 months had passed since the Zephyrian fleet first appeared over Earth's cities. What Admiral Vorthok had promised would be a simple 3-day operation had become a grinding war that consumed resources and soldiers at an alarming rate. Commander Nexus sat in her private quarters, staring at the report she would soon transmit. To Zephyrian High Command, the numbers were impossible to believe, but she had verified them 3 times. She activated her communication device and began dictating. High Command, this is Commander Nexus reporting from Earth Conquest Operations. Subject species continues to demonstrate capabilities that exceed all previous intelligence estimates. She paused, knowing her next words would shock the Empire's leadership. Human forces have successfully reverse-engineered our energy weapon technology. Estimated timeline was 50 to 100 years. Actual timeline? 6 weeks, deep beneath. The ruins of Geneva, Dr. So-Young Choi, worked by the light of improvised power cells in what had once been a subway tunnel. The Global Resistance Technology Division operated from dozens of hidden locations like this one, connected by communication networks the aliens had not yet discovered. Her team had grown from 12 scientists to over 300, with experts from every major university on Earth contributing to their work. The breakthrough had come when they captured an intact Zephyrian assault craft in Brazil. Within days, teams in underground laboratories across 6 continents were analyzing every component. The power source is elegant in its simplicity, she explained to her assembled team via encrypted video link. They use a crystalline matrix to focus energy. but the crystals themselves can be grown using modified silicon manufacturing techniques. A scientist from the Tokyo Resistance Cell raised his hand. Dr. Choi, we've successfully produced 17 functional energy rifles. The output is only 60% of the original, but they work. Excellent. Share the manufacturing specifications. With all cells immediately. Remember, every piece of their technology we understand makes us more dangerous to them. The psychological aspect of the resistance had proven equally effective. Captain Jamin's song had evolved from a fighter pilot into something the Zephyrians had never encountered before, a guerrilla warfare specialist who understood his enemy's weaknesses. His latest mission involved infiltrating a Zephyrian supply depot outside of what had been Paris. His team consisted of former soldiers from 12 different countries, united by months of fighting together against a common enemy. Remember, he whispered to his team as they approached the alien facility, "We're not just stealing supplies, we're sending a message." The raid began at midnight. Song's team disabled the perimeter sensors using techniques they had learned from captured equipment. They moved through the facility like ghosts, taking what they needed while leaving behind something unexpected. Carefully prepared meals using Earth ingredients, arranged as if offering hospitality to guests. The psychological impact was exactly what Song intended. The Zephyrians found their security breached, their supplies stolen, but instead of destruction, they discovered an act of apparent kindness. It was the kind of unpredictable behavior that had begun to unnerve even veteran alien soldiers. "They don't follow logical patterns," one Zephyrian soldier reported to his commander. "Yesterday they fought us with desperate violence. Today they leave us food. We cannot predict their actions." Admiral Vorthok found himself in the uncomfortable position of requesting additional resources from High Command. His original force of 12 ships had been reinforced twice, but human resistance showed no signs of weakening. The response from Zephyrian High Command came through secure channels, and the tone was unmistakably harsh. "Admiral Vorthok, you command sufficient firepower to sterilize the planet's surface 3 times over. You have more soldiers than the target species has military personnel. Complete your mission using existing resources." But the situation on Earth had changed dramatically from the initial intelligence reports. Vorthok was no longer fighting a divided planet of primitive tribes. He was fighting a unified species that learned faster than any conquest manual had prepared him for. Lieutenant Colonel Minho Kim coordinated global resistance operations from a command center buried 50 meters beneath Seoul. His facility had been carved out of solid rock and shielded against the alien scanning technology. From here, He maintained contact with resistance cells on every continent. His team had achieved something remarkable. They had broken Zephyrian communication encryption. Not completely, but enough to intercept fragments of their transmissions. What they discovered changed everything. "Commander, you need to hear this," his intelligence officer called out. She played back an intercepted transmission between 2 Zephyrian patrol units. The alien voices spoke in their own language, but the translation software developed by Dr. Choi's team provided subtitles. "Central Command, requesting immediate extraction. Human forces in this sector demonstrate unusual psychological characteristics. Explain, Patrol 7. They fight beyond logical parameters. Even when facing certain death, they continue aggressive action. Command, they appear to prefer annihilation over surrender. This behavior pattern is disturbing to unit morale." Kim leaned back in his chair, processing what he had heard. "They're afraid," he said quietly. "Not of our weapons. They're afraid of us." The intelligence officer nodded. "Sir, there's more. They've developed a new classification for us in there. Military reports." She played another intercepted transmission. This time the translation was clearer. Species designation update. Earth humans, reclassified from standard integration target to cornered predator species. Recommendation, extreme caution in all ground operations. Kim smiled grimly. Cornered predators. I like that. The war had evolved beyond anything in Zephyrian experience. They were fighting an enemy that treated impossible odds as merely another tactical challenge. Human forces had transformed from desperate survivors into something that made veteran alien soldiers request transfers to other campaigns. Commander, Nexus completed her report with a recommendation she had never made in 20 years of conquest. Operations High Command respectfully request immediate strategic review of Earth operations. Current approach is unsustainable. 2 years and 3 months after the first Saphirian ships appeared over Earth, Admiral Vorthok finally stood victorious in the ruins of what had once been Sol. The city stretched around him like a graveyard of twisted metal and broken concrete. Smoke still rose from buildings that had been bombed weeks ago. The final phase of the conquest had been brutal beyond anything in Zephyrian military history. When conventional ground forces failed to break human resistance, Vorthok had been forced to use weapons the Empire typically reserved for sterilizing uninhabited worlds. Orbital bombardment platforms had reduced major cities to rubble. Biological weapons had been deployed to break the will of survivors. It had worked. But the cost made Vorthok's mandibles ache with stress. Dr. Hyenwoo Kim walked slowly across the debris-covered ground toward the alien commander. The scientist who had first detected the Zephyrian fleet looked nothing like the man from 2 years ago. His clothes were torn and patched. Deep lines marked his face, and a scar ran from his left temple to his jaw. But his eyes remained sharp. And alert behind Kim walked the other survivors who represented what remained of Earth's governments. There were 12 of them, leaders chosen from the scattered resistance cells that had continued fighting even after their cities fell. "I am Dr. Kim," he said in English, knowing the aliens had learned human languages during their occupation. "I speak for the surviving human population." Admiral Vorthok studied the human delegation. These were the people who had cost him more soldiers than his previous 47 conquests combined. They looked broken and defeated, but something in their posture suggested they were not truly surrendering. "Your resistance is ended," Vorthok declared through his translation device. "Your species will be integrated into the Zephyrian Empire according to standard protocols." Dr. Kim nodded slowly. "Yes, you have won this war. Your weapons were superior, and your numbers were greater. But you should understand something important, Admiral." Vorthok's 6 eyes focused on the human leader. "Speak, in our 1,000-year history," Kim said, deliberately echoing words he had heard the Admiral use in intercepted communications. "No enemy has ever taught us as much as you have. We know now that your empire can be defeated. We understand your technology, your tactics, and most importantly, your weaknesses." The alien commander felt a chill run through his body. "Your planet is conquered. Your people are dead or scattered. What does your knowledge matter now?" Kim smiled, and the expression was more unsettling than any show of anger would have been. "Admiral, do you really believe you killed all of us?" Unknown to the Zephyrian occupying forces, the final months of the war had seen dozens of desperate escape attempts. Most had failed. Some had succeeded in ways that would haunt the Empire for years to come. Captain Jamin Song had led one of the most daring operations in human history. Using intelligence gathered by Lieutenant Colonel Minho Kim's network, his team had identified a Zephyrian corvette undergoing repairs in a hidden facility outside Bangkok. The ship's crew had been eliminated. Song had somehow managed to get the vessel operational. His crew consisted of 37 survivors from 12 different countries. Among them was Dr. Soyoung Choi, who had smuggled critical research. Data about Zephyrian technology in a device no larger than a coin. Also aboard were 2 captured Zephyrian soldiers who had been convinced to cooperate in exchange for better treatment than they had received from their own commanders. The corvette had slipped away from Earth during the final orbital bombardment. Its stolen identification codes, allowing it to pass through Zephyrian checkpoints. Song's destination was unknown even to himself, but his mission was clear: survive and spread the knowledge humanity had gained through 2 years of desperate warfare. Similar escapes had occurred across the globe. A fishing boat captain named Jinwoo Park had somehow acquired a damaged Zephyrian shuttle and managed to repair it with help from resistance engineers. His crew of 18 included specialists in alien technology and guerrilla warfare tactics. In total, nearly 300 humans had escaped Earth aboard captured or salvaged alien vessels, Each group carried weapons, technology specifications, and most dangerously, the knowledge that the Zephyrian Empire was not invincible. Commander Nexus submitted her final report from the bridge of the flagship. The numbers made for disturbing reading, even to someone who had witnessed the entire campaign. Earth conquest complete, she dictated to the ship's computer.
Cash.
Total Zephyrian casualties, 847,000 personnel. Equipment losses, 36 ships of various classes, 450 atmospheric craft, approximately. 60% of all deployed ground vehicles and weapons systems. She paused, staring out at the scarred planet below. Local population reduced by 94%. Surviving humans number approximately 480 million, scattered across remote locations and underground facilities. The report continued with technical details. But Nexus added a personal note that would prove prophetic. Recommendation for High Command: develop new protocols for species exhibiting similar resistance patterns. Standard integration procedures proved inadequate for this operation. But even as Nexus filed her report, disturbing news was reaching Zephyrian High Command from across the galaxy. Slave populations on conquered worlds had somehow learned about humanity's resistance. The story was spreading in whispered conversations and secret messages. On Kepler 44b, a world conquered 15 years earlier, the local population had begun asking questions their overseers couldn't answer. Is it true there was a planet that fought the Empire for 2 years? Is it true they made the Zephyrians bleed? Similar reports came from dozens of worlds. The Empire's reputation for swift, overwhelming victory was cracking. For the first time in centuries, conquered species were beginning to believe that resistance might be possible. Admiral Vorthok completed the surrender ceremony and returned to his ship, believing his mission accomplished. He had no idea that his victory had planted the seeds of the Empire's eventual destruction. 5 years had passed since Admiral Vorthok stood victorious in the ruins of Sol. He had believed the human problem was solved, their planet conquered, their species broken. Now he stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching energy blasts tear through his ship's shields, and realized how wrong he had been. The attack had come without warning. Vorthok's fleet was patrolling the Outer Rim territories when dozens of ships dropped out of hyperspace around them. But these were not Zephyrian vessels or ships from any known enemy species. These were human designs, modified and improved with technology from across the galaxy. Admiral, incoming transmission on all frequencies, his communications officer reported. Put it through, Vorthok commanded, though part of him already knew what he would hear. Captain Jamin Song's voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect Zephyrian. Admiral Vorthok, this is Captain Song of the Free Human Fleet. Do you remember me? I was one of those primitive pilots you thought you had defeated. Vorthok's mandibles clicked with shock. Song had been reported killed during the final bombardment of Earth. Impossible. You died with your world. Many of us died, Admiral, but not all. And those of us who survived have been very busy for the past 5 years. Around the Zephyrian fleet, the human ships moved with precision that impressed even their enemies. These were not the desperate, improvised tactics of the Earth resistance. These were coordinated military operations carried out by a fleet that had learned from the best teachers in the galaxy, experience and necessity. Song's flagship was a modified Zephyrian cruiser, but it bore weapons and armor that combined technologies. From dozens of different worlds, the human captain had spent 5 years visiting every corner of the galaxy, gathering allies and learning from every species the Empire had conquered. How many ships do you command? Vorthok asked, though he suspected he did not want to know the answer. Today, 300 vessels crewed by humans and our allies. Tomorrow, perhaps 1,000. The number grows every day, Admiral. Every world we liberate sends us more ships and more soldiers. On the planet Kepler 4 for 2b, the liberation had begun 3 months earlier. Dr. Sa-Young Choi, calling herself Admiral Choi, had landed with a small force of human fighters and local volunteers. She had spent 2 years on this world, living among the conquered population and teaching them what humanity had learned about Zephyrian warfare. Their energy weapons have a recharge cycle of 2.3 seconds. She had explained to the resistance. Leaders, in that time you can move 15 meters if you're fast. Their armor is strongest in the front and weakest at the joints. Most importantly, they expect you to run when they fire. If you charge instead, you can reach them before they can fire again. The tactics that had developed during Earth's desperate defense proved devastatingly effective when used by species who had been planning their revenge for years. The Zephyrian garrison on Kepler 442b had been eliminated in 6 hours. Similar uprisings were happening across the galaxy. Lieutenant Colonel Minho Kim had established a training academy on Proxima Centauri b, a world liberated 8 months earlier. Hundreds of alien species sent their best fighters to learn human guerrilla warfare techniques. The irony was not lost on Kim. The tactics developed to save Earth were now being used to free the galaxy. The key is not to fight their strength, he taught his students. Fight their assumptions. Expect you to behave like all their previous enemies. Don't give them what they expect. Dr. Hyen-Woo Kim had become something he never expected, a weapons designer for a galactic rebellion. His workshops on dozens of liberated worlds produced energy weapons based on reverse-engineered Zephyrian technology, but improved with innovations from multiple species. Every conquered world had something to teach us, he explained to his engineering teams. The Kepler people understood energy focusing. The Proxima species had mastered metallurgy. The Vega colonies knew propulsion systems. When we combine all their knowledge with what we learned fighting the Zephyrians, we become more dangerous than any single world could be. Admiral Vorthak's flagship shuddered again as another energy blast penetrated his shields. Around him, his fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that should not have existed. How many worlds have joined your rebellion? He asked Captain Song. 43 star systems have declared independence from your empire, Song replied. More are joining every day. The word is spreading, Admiral. Every species in the galaxy is learning the same lesson we learned on Earth. You can be beaten. Vorthak looked at his tactical display and saw the truth he had been denying. Red symbols showed Zephyrian worlds under attack. Yellow symbols showed worlds that had stopped responding to Imperial commands, and green symbols showed worlds that had openly declared independence. The Empire was collapsing. Command, this is Admiral Vorthak, he transmitted to Zephyrian High Command. The human problem is far worse than we believed. They haven't just survived. They've created the largest rebellion in our history. His flagship's hull began to crack under the sustained assault. Emergency lights flashed as systems failed one by one. Command, final report, Vorthak said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. We made a critical error. We didn't conquer one primitive world. We awakened an entire galaxy. The humans didn't just resist us. They taught everyone else that resistance was possible. The transmission ended as Captain Song's fleet completed its mission. Another Zephyrian admiral had learned too late what happened when you underestimated humanity.